Okay, hi folks. Mr. O'Brien here, and I'm just here to give you guys a quick recap of the main concepts we've talked about this week, as well as provide you a couple quick little demonstrations here to help illustrate some of those concepts that we've been reading about. So, when we got back from spring break on Monday, we started a new unit on chemical reactions. So keep in mind, chemical reactions occur when we start taking chemical bonds that hold molecules and compounds together, breaking those bonds apart and letting them reform in new combinations to create new substances in the process. I had you guys look over the assignment sheet for the Everyday Chemical Reactions project and start thinking about what chemical reaction you want to study for your independent research. Okay, remember those forms for your topic requests are due today. Okay, that's a Google form available either through my website or on Google Classroom as well. So then on Tuesday, I asked you to start reading a really important article about a reaction that's taking place on our planet right now called ocean acidification. And as we learn new information about chemical reactions, I'm going to be using ocean acidification to kind of show how these concepts play out in real life with a real chemical reaction that is ocean acidification. This is the same process that you guys are going to do with your topics for everyday chemical reactions. So say I'm going to talk right now a little bit about evidence of chemical reactions as they relate to ocean acidification. If you're doing a project on rust, you're going to talk about evidence of a chemical reaction for iron oxide formation or rust formation. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about ocean acidification right now in general. So I know you guys have been missing out on my beautiful artistic talents, so I'm trying to bring all that a little bit back for you now. Okay, let's just focus on the top third of this board right now where it says ocean acidification. Okay, ocean acidification occurs when human beings burn fossil fuels. Okay, that's what I'm picturing here with this power plant. Okay, so when we burn oil or coal or gas, that's a chemical reaction taking place. And one of the products of that is carbon dioxide. Okay, so if I burn anything like gas from this cigarette lighter, okay, and I light that and I'm burning it, one of the products that's coming out of this flame right now, even though we can't see it, is CO2. Okay, CO2 gas goes up into the atmosphere and it contributes to climate change, but not all of it stays there. Okay, sometimes the CO2 in our air ends up being dissolved into seawater. So it travels through the air, and sometimes if it hits the surface of the ocean, it'll dissolve into that water. So where the sky and the ocean meet, this is where another chemical reaction is occurring. Okay, this CO2 is mixing with H2O in the seawater, and the bonds that hold these molecules break apart, and the atoms recombine in new ways to create a new substance, okay, called carbonic acid, okay, which is denoted by the chemical formula H2CO3. So carbonic acid is an acid, okay? Acids are corrosive. That means that they like to eat away at things, including the calcium carbonate that makes up the shells of marine organisms like mussels, clams, oysters, and corals. And a lot of these animals, they make up a really important part of the ocean food chain. So when their shells get broken down by this acid, it can wreak havoc on marine ecosystems. So in order to simulate this chemical reaction for you, I have an Erlenmeyer flask here, okay, and I filled it with H2O. So just like seawater is mostly H2O, I've got H2O in the form of water right here, okay. You'll notice this is really blue color because it's not just H2O. I also have another chemical in here called bromothymol blue, okay. This chemical changes colors from blue to kind of a yellowish or greenish yellow if an acid is present. So just like CO2 is produced when we burn fossil fuels, CO2 is also produced when the mitochondria in our cells burn glucose in order to produce ATP energy. And we breathe this CO2 out as a waste product when we exhale, just like fossil fuel plants billow that out as they burn their fuels. So I'm going to blow the CO2 from my breath through the straw into the water in order to dissolve it, just in the same way that CO2 from our cars and power plants would dissolve in the ocean. Okay, so take a look at what happens as we start introducing this CO2 here. See if you can notice whether or not a chemical reaction is taking place. All right. Okay. So the next piece of reading that we did was a review of chemical changes and what observable evidence we can see that one has taken place. So in your article that you read on Wednesday, it mentioned three in particular. Okay. Number one, a color change taking place. Okay. Number two, the formation of a gas. And number three, the formation of a solid precipitate out of a solution. So if you mix two liquids together and a solid forms in the process, that's what we call a precipitate. And you may remember from our chemical changes lab way back at the start of our matter unit, I think it was back in November, there's also some other pieces of evidence we can look at too. A change in temperature, the release of a light, or the formation of a new odor or a new taste. Okay, the more examples of these types of evidence that we can observe, the stronger our cases that a chemical reaction has taken place. So for your topics, you're going to need to present on what observational evidence supports your conclusion that a chemical reaction has occurred. Did anybody notice, by the way, evidence that a chemical reaction has occurred here? All right. And lastly, you guys read an article yesterday about chemical reactions and the relationship with energy. So this might be a little complicated, just bear with me here, okay? But I want you guys to remember when we were learning about elements in the periodic table that all atoms, all elements aside from the noble gases, they don't like to be alone, okay? They much prefer to be bonded to other atoms. And so it takes some energy in order to break the bonds that hold them together apart. And then when new bonds form, some energy is released, okay? So that leads us to these two different types of chemical reactions, okay? The first that I'm going to cover today is called an exothermic reaction, okay? An exothermic reaction gets its name from exo meaning out and therm, which means heat, okay? And it gets its name because we usually get heat out of these reactions. Again, when we start these reactions, it takes a little bit of energy. So this is energy on my y-axis. We have to put energy into the reaction to break apart those bonds, and then we get a lot of energy back out when new bonds form, okay? So the total amount of energy that we get out of here is greater than the total amount of energy that we had to put in, okay? These types of reactions typically release heat. So that example of burning fossil fuels, okay, burning gas, burning oil, we get some heat out of here. That's a good piece of evidence that our chemical reaction is exothermic, okay? The other type of chemical reactions that we learned about are called endothermic. We call these reactions endo because more energy is being put into the reaction than we're getting out, okay? So these reactions are ways of storing energy, okay? We put all of this energy into the reaction, okay, right here, and we only got this much energy out of the reaction. So we had to put more in than we got out, okay? So it was a greater investment of energy. An example of this might be like photosynthesis, where plants are storing light energy in glucose molecules, okay? All right, let me get this away because I want to show you guys just one more demonstration today. Okay, in addition to having both exothermic and endothermic reactions, energy can have a really huge impact on how quickly reactions can take place. So, in order to demonstrate this concept, I've got two identical beakers that I'm going to have set up here. Okay, one's going to have hot water, and the other is going to have cold water. So give me 1 second to grab my cold water out of my freezer. Okay, so I'm going to run an identical reaction here. The only difference between these two beakers is the temperature of the water, okay? And I've got two Alka-Seltzer tablets here. Okay, Alka-Seltzer tablets, they dissolve in water and they produce CO2 in the process as well. Okay, so while my hot water is heating up, I'm going to take that same indicator that I used before called bromothymol blue. I'm going to put 1 dropper's worth in each of these beakers. I think we probably need 2 actually. Okay. All right. So I'm going to drop these Alka-Seltzer tablets into each one of these beakers at the exact same time. And I want you to guess, before I do this, in which beaker you think the reaction is going to happen faster. Okay? All right. Sounds like my hot water is ready. Make sure we've got the same amount of water in both of these beakers. Okay. And I'll start the reaction now. So what do you think is going to happen faster? Okay, the reaction in our hot water or our cold water? We'll begin now. All right, so as you can clearly see here, okay, the Alka-Seltzer tablet in the hot water is already completely dissolved. The reaction has totally run its course. Whereas in the cold water here, you can see the Alka-Seltzer is almost completely intact here. It is dissolving, but it's taking a much, much longer time to do so. So, what do you think? Did you guess right? And based on your knowledge of thermal energy and the movement of molecules, think about why do you think this is the case? All right, guys, that's it for me. Have a wonderful weekend. Make sure that you complete the remainder of the task for this assignment, and we'll see you all on Monday. All right, thanks and take care.